to finding calm in the chaos. I am Denise Sith, and this is my podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday in Finding Calm in the Chaos. You know I'm Denise, and yes, I am struggling still with my voice. At some points, I don't have it at all. I have tea here, so we'll see how this goes. It's been an interesting week, people. So this week, we're going to talk about jumping the fence, and that fence is boundaries. Oh my gosh, I have to drink already. This is crazy, my boys. I'm not going to let you guys hear me drink, so I'm just going to pause and keep recording. Bear with me, friends. Anyway, so let's just say I've had some major boundaries crossed. And some are my problem, and some are other people's problems. But I sat down and I talked to my therapist because y'all know I love her. I don't even know if she listens to this, but sometimes I think she does, because we'll be in a therapy session and she'll say something that I swear I didn't tell her, but I talked about on a podcast. So maybe she does listen. There's that. So she should be proud of me, though, that I share all this information and all these little nuggets with you guys. So you don't have to pay for 10 years of therapy, or maybe you should. I think everybody should have a therapist. It's my personal opinion. This whole podcast is my personal opinion. And I'm going to do my disclaimer in that I am not a therapist. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a psychologist. I am just a person just like you who sees a therapist because my life is really jacked up. And I learn a lot of stuff in therapy and in reading and in trying to grow personally. And so I share that with you so that you don't feel that you're alone in your struggles like I usually do in my own. There's that. I sat with a mom today for coffee. It was supposed to be 2 hours, and 5 hours later, we're like, shoot, maybe we should go home. To find out that we both had the exact same issues, which made me feel like very like bonded. Like I felt like I felt She-Ra. I had like a She-Ra moment. I'm aging myself. There's some Gen X shit there. But also that I felt kind of pissed that somebody else felt the same crap I did in my life. I'm like, I'm so sorry, but yeah, sister, you know, that kind of thing. So I thought to myself, so I had something happen. I'm not going to talk it on this podcast because I want to structure this into just like the lesson I learned, and perhaps you can take whatever you want from it. However, I'll talk about the situation more in depth on Coffee Talk. Because in all honesty, I'm still kind of getting over it. You know what I'm saying? So, is it possible to set boundaries without guilt? Because I'm going to say nope. Because here's the deal. So I feel like when you set a goal for setting boundaries, that you don't want to feel guilty. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Why should you feel guilty about setting a boundary? However, if it's a worthy goal, there shouldn't be any issues if you're holding a boundary firm. And obviously it would make it easier. Like, wouldn't that be great? All your boundaries are set. You don't feel guilty. Like, perfect, right? Bomb. However, I don't even know if that's obtainable. I mean, maybe it could be. For me, so far, no. It's a no. And unfortunately, I'm starting to realize that the dream of setting boundaries without feeling guilty, even like a little bit of guilty, is pretty much non-existent. Because in my experience thus far, I feel that an extreme level of discomfort when I establish and maintain a personal boundary, simply for a few reasons. And so I'm going to go through some of these reasons that I think are why I struggle with them. And you too, my friends, maybe as well. First off, it's hard to set boundaries. Okay. But I think there's like good news. I mean, there is good news for me because I'm always working. I really do. I don't think it's possible to not feel guilty. I don't think you could be guilt free when you set boundaries, but I do think you could like minimize the pain on it, right? That you're only getting a little, you're reducing your guilt just a little bit. But I'd rather have a little bit than a lot of it. You know what I'm saying? And I think that there's a way to manage and kind of tolerate it so it doesn't flip you where you're not setting boundaries. You know, you're not holding it, because that's where I always got myself into trouble. And I work with my therapist. You can work with whomever, psychiatrist, whatever works for you. Okay. Psychologist. I work with my therapist because I know what I need to do. It's just a matter of eliminating guilt and not feeling bad after I hold them. So I either don't set boundaries, which is poopy, and then I do set boundaries and then I get made fun of, and like I get a lot of crap from people, especially in my family. And then when I hold those boundaries, then I feel like poop because I got a really bad reaction to it. Because most people who will freak out to your boundary lines are people who know that they're a boundary and they're not going to take their crap. That's why they're freaking out, because they're used to walking all over people and not caring. But because you were firm, and you may or may not have been in the past, or you're just someone who just like, they always do that. They're like boundary crossers. There are people who do that in life, right? People who want to use people to the extreme, take advantage of their kindness or whatnot. I'm going to talk about that. The first thing that I realized is that when I set boundaries, they weren't realistic. I'm just like they were so like drastic. Like, I'm not going to talk to them for 5 years. That's not how it goes. Especially like if they're family. I mean, there are circumstances where you can cut people out of your life and all that. But when you're just setting a boundary, you can't just be like, yeah, that's an unrealistic. You're going to see them. Okay. And to me, I feel like it's common to feel guilt and like challenging emotions while, before, after you actually set boundaries. But in my experience, I feel like anxious sometimes, afraid, awkward, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not really sure I should be holding the boundary in this particular instance. Ashamed. Sometimes I feel shamed. I don't even know where that came from, but you can have whatever, right? Combination of them, right? When I establish a boundary. But I am somehow, I feel like when anybody establishes a boundary, that you have some level of uncomfortableness, right? Discomfort, I guess I should say. Uncomfortableness. I don't know. That's a lot of letters. You know what I'm saying? Let's just go with discomfort. Especially if you're new. Right? If you're not used to setting boundaries, that's me, right? I always say I'm going to set boundaries, and then they're weak. They are weak. And I'm like, that really wasn't a boundary for real, Denise, you know? But then when you actually set it, then it's a problem. Okay. And you're like all nervous and you have all these feelings going through you. And so for me, I don't want to scare myself away from it because of those feelings, because you can. You're like, oh, last time I set a boundary, you know, and they said that, and I was like, I couldn't say no because they felt weird and I was afraid to do it. And just don't do it. Like, you have to hold firm to set that boundary. But one of the things you have to do is have a realistic expectation so that you're not like taken by surprise. I feel like I'm always taken by surprise. Like somebody jumps out like in a clown uniform from like a dumpster. Right now, I feel like my life is a dumpster fire. Listen Saturday. And you know, it's just, I feel like to be better prepared, I'll be less likely also to like give up when I know what to expect. No, I'm going to be scared to do it. Know that I might be ashamed or whatever, but that this boundary was here for a reason, because not having them was a problem. You know what I'm saying? And then remember the consequences of weak boundaries. So like I kind of segued myself right into that. So setting realistic expectations, but also reminding yourself that there are consequences behind having weak boundaries or no boundaries, because you got here for a reason, right? Setting boundaries is hard as hell. like, I'll tell you that's straight. It's the hardest thing that I do sometimes. But it's not setting boundaries. Yeah, that's a problem as well. Right? Because we spend so much time, I do, kind of like lingering on what could go wrong, that I really just don't even consider like having a healthier, more authentic relationship. Does that make sense? So I'm just so consumed in the opposite of what is going on that I don't realize that if I set the boundary to begin with and I hold it, that you get better relationships from that. And so if I consider that I'm already sacrificing by having weak boundaries or no boundaries, that I'm passing up self-care, most likely, other opportunities for joy. And I do that because I set a boundary because it made me feel uncomfortable. And yet I let it repeatedly be crossed. And that interferes with my self-care. I'm going through that right now. And I'm drawing the line. I needed this to remind myself, just in case you guys needed to remind yourself. You know what I'm saying? But when I'm stressed, when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm burned out from just saying yes or doing all the time, some women out there know what I'm saying. Doing every minute of your life, you're doing. Okay? When you'd rather just say no, those relationships that you have are going to be polluted by resentment. You're going to be disappointed. You're going to be frustrated. And where's this getting us in life? I'll tell you where it's getting you. Nowhere. Nowhere. That comes from a movie or something. That just came out of me. But the way I said it, nowhere. Where's that getting you? Nowhere. If anybody knows that, put that on the thing so I know. But for me, if I allow these, whatever these fears are that are causing these worst case scenarios, right? From setting personal boundaries, because I am in my head more than my brain. Like legit. There ain't a bigger truth than what I just said. There ain't nothing bigger in my head than it's horrible. But I'm going to continue to experience the same problems unless I get over this. And I am. But the good point for me, like the good part of this, is that at least it's happening less. So I occasionally hold my boundaries, but I don't always. Like, does that make sense? I don't even know. So I just feel like you can either deal with these things forever or experience some temporary guilt and just get over it, right? So it's up to me. I need to just deal with this, have the remorseful guilt, a little bit of feeling, and then move on. Because in the long run, if I don't hold the boundary, I'm going to feel even crappier. So just deal with a little guilt. Over time, that guilt will reside and it won't be as bad. All right. But it'll still be there, but it won't be as bad. Next one is learn to differentiate healthy boundaries versus selfishness. So this is something that I struggle with. Not that I'm selfish, but I struggle from like determining in my mind. I want to say like delineating, but I don't think that's it. You know how I struggle with words now. Thank you, Lyme disease. But I feel like there are boundaries selfish? Like, obviously, like you're doing, okay, here's the deal. I kept saying that, like, well, I should do this for people or whatever. If I just say no, like, aren't I being selfish? But then underlying that no, comes this idea to be a people pleaser and always get like affirmation from people. I have to have somebody tell me that I'm doing a good job. Thank you, childhood trauma. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm telling you right now, I'm just saving money for my kids' therapist. Are boundaries selfish? Well, here's the deal. So this is what I discussed with my therapist, and I was reading some other things about this, and it kind of like, I guess it depends on who you're talking to, but is your boundary all about the other person and what you want from them, right? Are you like insisting that they do something for you or give you something you're not entitled to, right? just assuming that, you have a right to like time, energy, possessions, that kind of stuff, right? Here's the thing. That just happened to me, but not to me. I held a boundary and somebody else had that reaction. Like they felt they were entitled to my things. And if you feel that way while you're going through your boundary might be a demand. That's selfish. Okay. Now my personal boundary in this circumstance was not that way. On the other end of this spectrum, okay, a healthy boundary focuses on me, right? Or you. It's your boundary. Okay. It will define what you will and will not tolerate in a relationship and what you will do when those boundaries are crossed, right? Because boundaries are healthy limits, okay? And they are what keep you from feeling chronically worn out, unappreciated, and pretty much used up, okay? So for me, when I'm feeling, well, I'm always chronically worn out. Do you see how great I'm holding my boundaries? So think about this, chronically worn out, unappreciated, and used. If you're feeling like this every day, you have zero boundaries, weak boundaries, or you're not holding your boundaries. Because you can set them and feel like you're balling like I do, but then you don't hold them. And then you're like, duh, same feeling. Okay. If someone in your life is taking more than they give, setting boundaries with them, that's not selfish. Okay. That's not selfish. Even if the other person is like angry about it, disappointed, sad, I know, at a thing, right? I don't care if you're sad. You cannot have those things. That's not selfish. All right. So there's that. In my experience, people who struggle to keep boundaries or differentiate between boundaries and being selfish also might confuse being nice with being kind. And I see this a lot. Obviously, my whole, motto is lead with kindness. And I think a lot of people confuse that. People with weak boundaries try to be nice to please others. And then you fall into this separate trap. And I'm already a people pleaser, right? Even when their heart's not in it, you're like, I don't want them to be mad at me, But no, I don't have time for that. I'm already exhausted. Why I got to do more? Just say no. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And when you give away your time and your resources, then it starts becoming an obligation. And now you don't like it at all because that really takes a toll on you. People who take care of themselves with healthy boundaries, we give out a genuine kindness. So I found that when I hold the boundaries and I say yes when I want to say yes and no when I want to say no, I'm genuinely a nicer person. I'm kinder, all of that. That is like a legit, it just is what it is. And I look back at it and I sometimes get angry at myself, like, why did you fall into that again? But that's kind of like life, right? You do things little by little. You learn, you live and you learn. If you don't live and you learn, you can't. What are we here for? Setting boundaries when you're calm. Well, that's hard to do in my house because nobody wants to hear me unless I'm screaming. I'm just saying. Now, normally I would say this is just me, but I just had coffee with a mom this morning that has the same issue. And I've talked to other people in similar situations. And I don't know what is going on in the world today, but I am letting you know, all the moms of the world, I hear and see your SOS. And I am ready to stand up and take over with you. I'm done. And I think you should be done too. Just saying. So that aside, we're supposed to set boundaries when we're calm, right? Because when you're already feeling like you're feeling a little apprehensive, I guess, cautious about like what actually can happen with the consequences of you setting a boundary, that then becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. You know what I'm saying? You worry so much about what could happen that it becomes this big deal in your head. Doesn't mind. Y'all feeling me here? This is my life right now. When you communicate, right, that boundary, it's just not coming across, right? Because you're just so worried about it and you're so filled with anxiety. And I'm always like totally freaking out, right? It's just crazy, right? You do so, when you start doing that, you're likely to raise the other person's defenses like right away. So you really need to talk to them. The conversation then will turn into a fight. You're likely to say something you later regret. Everything comes out of my mouth I later regret. It's like my life. It is what it is. I can't I try, but sometimes you got to get try from both sides. It can't just all be like my side. I already feel like I'm like a dirty carpet just walking around while everybody steps on me. It's pretty much my life right now. So sorry if there are any more dirty carpet moms out there. I say we just stop. But I think in order to do this, because what happens is that I don't keep my boundaries and I just tell my therapist about it. And then she keeps telling me to set my boundaries and just talk to, Mr. Sith or whomever, right? Usually it's Mr. Sith and Peter, but then I don't, or I put it off, or they ignore me, and then I'm doing stuff, and then I'm doing everybody's stuff. And then before I know it, all that resentment builds, and then it just comes out suddenly and aggressively. I just blow up. Sound familiar? Yeah, this is my life right now. To try to avoid this, okay, she's recommending, my therapist, that if I set boundaries before I reach my break point, I'm like, imagine that. If possible, right? Try to have the conversations when I'm calm, right? And consider the other person's point of view. I get that. And here's our biggest frustration right now. I feel like I'm frustrated and my therapist is frustrated. And that when I want to have a calm conversation, everybody's playing a video game and I'm ignored. Turn it off. It's a big deal. We're on the phone, or when you talk to somebody and then at the same time, they're on their phone. Yeah. Makes you irate just thinking about it, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So apparently we're supposed to set them before we reach our emotional break point. I'm working on it. Because apparently when you actually set boundaries when you're calm and you're compassionate, the person on the receiving end feels less hurt. And I'm supposed to feel less guilty. Yeah, sure. Okay. Goals. Anyway, next one. Consider your upbringing. So pretty much I'm gonna sum this up. If you are a Gen Xer or you grew up with any kind of childhood trauma, yeah, we're fucked. I don't have any sponsors that I'm paying right now. I don't like any of them. So there we go. I don't care anymore about that. I am just doing this because I do it because I love it. But I will tell you, here are some things. So when you are brought up and children are shamed and yelled at for having needs or preferences when you grow up, our survival, when we're kids, kids' survival depends on their parents, right? They pick up people pleasing as a survival tool. Hello, raising my hand right now, biggest people pleaser in the world. And I know where I got that crap from, okay? But certain family dynamics, right? They gonna make this scenario more likely, okay? I'm not saying it's everybody. This is my personal opinion, my conversations and notes with my therapist. Okay. But if you were dismissed, ridiculed, belittled when you expressed your needs, this is Gen X 100%. You probably were labeled as dramatic, difficult, ungrateful. Yeah. Boom. There you go. People pleaser. When you refused to do things that made you uncomfortable, hugging weird Uncle, Greg, because he always smelled weird stuff and whiskey. And they were like, don't do that. You say sorry and be nice and give him a hug. Yeah, in Gen X days, that's the stuff you had to do. Could you imagine that happening in today's world? I mean, they go to the extreme in today's world, but you know what I'm saying? If you had too many responsibilities for your age, like perhaps you like raised yourself, Gen X. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, whatever. Yeah, I get it. But if you also had too many responsibilities for your age, like because there was an absence of a parent, addiction of a caregiver, physical illness, mental health problems, that kind of stuff, boom, that's an issue too. You were raised by somebody, possibly a narcissist, just saying, it's my experience, who basically withheld love and care if you didn't behave in a certain way, you know, whether or not you deserved it, that kind of thing. You felt unsafe due to physical or emotional abuse. These are all things. Or you had a caregiver who was like a worrywart, right? Overly worried, concerned, over involved in your life. You felt responsible as a kid for their emotions, so you learned to suppress yours to protect them. So your lack of boundaries, okay, that lack. So for me personally, not losing all boundaries as a child growing up, Gen X, that helped me survive childhood. If I wanted to, now that I'm an adult, I want to like be productive, I need to question why I feel so guilty about stuff. And it's most likely possible that my guilt is not like this measure of whether or not I could do it, but basically like that it's, I'm trying to think of the word, culpability. Sure, whatever. But it's basically an outdated coping mechanism. Like it's not even needed in my adult life, but that's what I'm doing. There's no reason that I shouldn't act on it by rescinding my boundaries. It's just not right. I need to get my boundaries in effect and keep them that way. The people please. There's so much involved in all this stuff. You know, as adults, we go through all of these emotions and all of these dilemmas and problems and things that come across and emotions and feelings. And all of this stuff stems from childhood and just how we are conditioned based on our childhoods to react to things in order to get through it. And then as adults, we're out here waving the white flag, wondering what the hell went on when we're literally using things that we used in our youth to survive that are no longer proper, adequate, needed, appropriate in our adulthood. And then we're wondering why we're out here swimming without a paddle, you know? We're out here with no life. No, that would be swimming. Boating without a paddle? Swimming without a life vest. There you go. Take a step back and think about it. This was my biggest thing. So for me, I'm very reactive, which is also, it's just also an effect of childhood trauma. I really didn't realize how problematic my relationships were until, number one, a friend pointed it out and my therapist pointed out. And even after they did it, I still found it difficult to break away from like this internalized belief that I had about myself. For me, it was like that I'm like, I don't matter. My feelings don't matter. I'm insignificant, you know, that kind of stuff. You'll never amount to anything, that kind of thing. What I needed was a new perspective. And when you break free from old patterns like that, because that's what they are, essentially patterns, bad patterns from childhood, I pretended like I was like an outside observer and just watched how I react to stuff and then try to break it apart, right? Pretend like you're a kind, compassionate friend. How do I want to be treated? That's how I want to treat other people. And then over time, those people have been drawn to me. I have dropped so many friends and family, not me personally, but they've just floated off into the horizon because when I changed my energy and my behaviors and I held up what I needed to do and my boundaries I put my foot down and I didn't mess around kindly, I find that those friendships are really valuable. They're very filled with, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, this is getting hard to do when you can't remember any words. Fulfilling and rewarding and satisfying. And you want to be friends with those people. You want them in your lives. And that's like the whole point, right? So take a look. For me, taking a look from the outside, my therapist helps me do that a lot. But then she'll also tell me, well, you were pushed. You were pushed. They all know that you have these issues, but yet they pushed you anyway. So sometimes you kind of need to wake them up, I guess. And I'm like, oh, well, since you said so, spend time. And this was another good segue here. Spending time with people who respect boundaries, because I realized, and this is funny, this is one of the things that I talked with my therapist. She was like, find people and look for people who are comfortable saying no and having no said to them. Because those are friends, people around you, it doesn't matter, co-op, whatever. Those are people who deserve the gift of your attention. Because when you spend time with people who can say no, and can take no, you can reprogram yourself to see that those boundaries are not selfish and that they're completely healthy and normal. And it also can show you that boundaries don't hurt healthy relationships. That is a key. That is a key. And I'm starting to realize that now. People who care about each other don't take away their affection when reasonable boundaries are drawn. Anyone who does that doesn't deserve a place in your life, period. There's always life, give and take. Life is give and take, okay? But don't be the giver and no one has anything for you to take. Because there's always some give and take, like as people, right? To sort out how to take up the equivalent space in a relationship. But like seeing that process can be very instructive when it comes to like what kind of friendships you want. And I think I have found a majority of those people. And I'm slowly but surely realizing that all of my family does not really qualify for this. I do have to keep them at arm's length with multiple boundaries. And I've just learned to just walk away and not discuss it any further. When I don't do that, like recent events, it's a problem. And then when I did it, they blew up because I didn't say things earlier. We'll talk about that on Saturday. Face your feelings. This is another one. So many people like myself, me raising my hand again. I habitually, I'm just going to even say you, because this is me horribly right now. I habitually bottle up, can up all my emotions in an attempt to be nice, because I've been told for so long how I'm difficult and a bitch and all that, not nice, to keep the peace. Okay. I know that might be hard for some people who actually know me now or know me from this podcast, but it's because I got to a point where I didn't want people to walk all over me anymore. And so I said stuff and that was it. They were all over me. When you don't tend to your emotional wounds or acknowledge the existence of them in the first place, they fester and they persist. And as a result of that, there's a problem. Okay. For me, I have to face my feelings like on a daily basis, or I will go into a rage episode. I learned coping strategies. I use, I don't journal. I know they say to journal when you have certain like issues, but I don't like anything written down. If I'm journaling, I'm burning that baby right after I write it. You can learn to tolerate guilt, shame, regret. When you stop avoiding the emotions, the feelings, they can actually teach you a lot about yourself, including where the inner boundaries lie. And for me, that happened like in a big way last weekend. Once you allow your feelings to serve their full purpose, they will begin to fade. So you just need to face your feelings. For me, sometimes I overfeel, and that's because I'm so passionate about things. And when I love people, I'm overly passionate because I will fight to the death for people. And not everybody has that same love ethic, I should say, friend ethic. I do. I'm 150% in everything I do. If I don't want to do it, I'm 0%. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of weird. Positive affirmations. I'm going to be real honest with you guys. My therapist tells me to do these all the time. And it's she says, oh, our brains, they're evolved to protect us. And so our thoughts tend to overfocus on threats, whether they're real or like make believe, it doesn't matter. But rather than like accepting these negative and fearful thoughts, like as your truth, you can basically get rid of the the inner pessimist with like neutral and positive statements. I'll be honest with you. I am so in my head 100% of the time. This is super difficult. I beat myself up more than Mike Tyson would. There's that kind of that. But I do try different stuff with that. But what I have tried to do, like over the last weekend's situation, which I'll talk about on Coffee Talk. I'm not being like, I don't want to name it. I just can't go there in this realm of, keeping the energy down. I feel like I did kind of like repeat to myself that my boundary is reasonable. My boundary was reasonable and it was crossed. My boundary was reasonable, more than reasonable, and it was crossed. And I tried to warn that people were getting close to the boundary and they didn't stop. And then they crossed it, and then they crossed it and threw shit all over on my side. And that's a definite no. So you just have to kind of, deal with it. Discomfort is part of the process, but you can do that healthily, in a healthy way. And the last one is apologize. Yeah, I struggle with this one too. Shocker. My therapist recommends against apologizing for any boundary I've set, since there's no reason to really regret taking good care of myself. Like if you're setting a boundary and somebody doesn't like it and you're like, oh, I'm sorry. No, you're not. No, you're not. I'm not. I set a boundary last weekend, got called every name in the book. And in my head, I was like, oh man, is this too much? Should I have done this? Regret, questioning. And then I was just like, nope. This boundary is reasonable. And if I'm apologizing for my limits, that's only going to cast doubt. And then that invites a pushback, because that's what I was getting. I let things go a little bit, and then I got pushback, and then I let things go, and then I got pushback, and then I like held firm, and then the explosion happened. But I still feel a little guilty, but not guilty in that way. I feel guilty that I should have better expressed or held my boundaries than I did. But I also can't help and be in control of another person. So, their reactions are their reactions, and you just got to do that. If you communicate a boundary, only apologize if you were intentionally hurtful because you were mad or had pent up feelings or whatever. If you communicated a reasonable boundary, is basically what I'm saying, but you could have done it more compassionately, it's okay to share your feelings and I guess apologize, but I wouldn't apologize for the boundary. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I'm sorry I lost my temper yesterday, but setting this, limit with you is important to me. And I could have better communicated that sooner without like insulting you or upsetting you. But because you're still holding your boundary, you know what I'm saying? So that's what's important. So I'm important. I guess in the long run, like, can you set boundaries without crippling guilt? It's possible, but you're still going to feel guilt. And if you need to talk to somebody about that, get a psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, whatever you want, and talk to them about what you're constantly struggling with to establish and maintain your own boundaries, and at least help you uncover like any like deep thoughts or feelings that you are having problems setting those healthy boundaries. You know what I'm going on? That's what's going on. All right, my friends, thank you so much. My voice lasted a whole episode. Let's see if it lasts through Coffee Talk, because I'm going to record that next. Happy Wednesday, and until next week or this week, Saturday, lead with kindness. Bye.